Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game So taking on a fun and exciting episode for you guys today, because I'm going to be talking about the Sega Hikaru, including the history of its development and just why it is one of the rarest Sega arcade boards out there. Because honestly, if you know me and you know the channel, you know I love me some Sega, and I basically have all of their 3D hardware in my closet, except a Hikaru board, because honestly, this thing has become my white whale of arcade collecting. We're going to go through the 6 games that are on the board, we're going to talk about the hardware and just how annoying it is, and we're going to talk about why Sega decided to develop the entire thing in the first place. Before we get too far involved though, do me a huge favor, go down below, hit like and subscribe, and ring that notification bell. Definitely helps us out. And if you feel so inclined and want to support the channel, I got a Patreon link down below as well. Now, the first game to come out for the Sega Hikaru board, and Sega's stated reason for making the Hikaru in the first place, was Brave Firefighters. In interviews from back in the day, different developers and hardware engineers at Sega stated that they didn't have hardware that was effective at actually producing this flame effect, all of the fog and the water effects at the same time, with all the different levels of transparency and lighting on the walls, and leave it to Sega to just decide, you know what, we're going to make another arcade board just so we can basically make this one game we have in our minds. And honestly, if you ever wonder why Sega got into financial trouble back in the day, it does really seem to be their insistence on just making new hardware anytime they kind of felt the need to do it. And while some of these effects are definitely not going to be possible on the Sega Naomi, it would have probably behooved Sega to actually save the money on the R&D and development costs of this hardware and just kind of change the game around ever so slightly. Don't get me wrong, you know I've loved bespoke 3D hardware, especially when it's made by Sega, but I'm always surprised that Hikaru actually got past the planning stages and somebody at Sega, especially in the accounting department, said, you know what, let's throw the money in there. Now, honestly, the Sega Hikaru is a very annoying board to deal with, and that is because it is extremely delicate. This is a video I did like 5 years ago at the very beginning of the channel almost. I've been trying to get a Planet Harriers board for years now, and I don't know what the hell the seller was thinking here, but they just basically threw the entire stack in loose with a little bit of paper around it, and it had no chance. The reason that Sega Hikaru hardware is so incredibly rare is because there is a manufacturing defect on the board in and of itself. You'll see at the bottom left hand corner of the screen, that chip is completely dislodged from the board. It broke all of the solder balls on the ball grid array. And unfortunately, that is not a common instance for Sega Hikaru boards. That is because when you're doing BGA work, you're supposed to tin the pads and then have the balls for solder on the other end. That way you get a better mechanical bond. Well, the factory forgot to tin the pads there for these things at the slightest bump, absolutely just dislodge themselves from the PCB, and then if you know how to do it, you're doing ball grid array work, and if you don't, you have a broken Hikaru motherboard. I have tried to buy 3 different Planet Harrier boards. 2 of them arrived with damage, even though I told the seller exactly how to package them, and one, the seller accidentally dropped the board trying to put it in a box, and guess what, 3 of the actual chips on the board just absolutely flew off. That is why these games are incredibly rare. Not only did none of them really become a huge success for Sega in arcades, not like the stuff on Naomi Model 2 or Model 3, but basically I would probably say like probably 80% plus of the actual Hikaru hardware out there has grenaded itself and basically become unplayable, and that really is unfortunate. Even some of the people that like to fix Sega hardware for others do not want to handle Hikaru repairs whatsoever unless it is a local drop-off and pickup, because even when you fix the boards, odds are in shipping, those chips are probably going to dislodge themselves again, leaving you with what amounts to a very expensive and very rare doorstop. And don't get me wrong, I definitely had more than one doorstop in my collection at any given point in time, but of the 6 arcade boards, all 3D and all complex, that I've had sitting around over the years that weren't working, I am down to just one that I cannot still seem to get to boot or do anything. But the reality of the situation is, if you want to buy a Hikaru right now, whether it's working and you want to take the risk on shipping, or whether it's broken and you want to try to repair it, I checked eBay, I checked Yahoo Auctions Japan, I talked to the people I know that help me find things, and I help them find things. There is not a single Hikaru PCB out there currently for sale, whether it is broken or working. And that is the thing, this hardware is incredibly complex and incredibly fragile, so there's so many examples of it that just basically probably got recycled years ago. So what is left now is extremely hard to find, and if I can't find it, that means it's rare. But it's one of those things, now that Demul handles all of the games, and the emulation is like 85 to 90% there on real hardware, it definitely keeps these games alive. Let's do a little soundtrack sample so we can talk about the hardware in just a moment, and I'll be right back with more. Hikaru definitely has good sound hardware, that is in fact true. If we take a look at the actual Hikaru PCB here, with one actual chip completely dislodged, Sega just over-engineered the ever-loving hell out of this thing. It shares some similarities with Dreamcast and Naomi using those Hitachi SH4 processors, but as far as the video side of things are concerned, it is a complete custom design, and the fact that it's completely broken all of the time absolutely does suck. Now, I totally get I could reball this chip, but when it came in from the seller, they basically either said send it back for a full refund or pay full price for a broken board, and I am not in the business of doing stuff like paying full price for something that didn't work whatsoever, especially after I told them how to package it and not how to package it, so I did send that back. But I will definitely find one of these boards one day, because I want a Planet Harriers board in my collection wired up to one of my arcade flight sticks so I can just sit down and play it. But for the most part, would I recommend this hardware for any sort of person out there that isn't a hardcore arcade collector? Absolutely not. It is garbage hardware. That's not to say I don't love it and I'm not making fun of it. It is just one of the most temperamental pieces of shit you can possibly collect, just down to the fact that they screwed up at the factory and they all just basically break if you look at them wrong. And for the most part, games like Trix here, you're not really going to get them wired up correctly in an arcade environment without the cabinet whatsoever. Sure, you could probably try to inject the controls with an Xbox Series X controller so you have analog left and right, but that kind of defeats the entire purpose, because Hikaru was basically for kind of like showcase cabinets or experiences. Trix here, you would stand on a skateboard, and obviously this game right here, NASCAR, you would be sitting in an actual chair with a wheel and pedal set in front of you. Now you can definitely wire those things up, but I would say as far as the overall range of Hikaru games, NASCAR Arcade as well as Star Wars Racer, I would say are kind of C-tier efforts from Sega. Sorry if you love those games, I'm not saying they're bad, but if I was going to spend the time to buy a Sega PCB and wire up custom racing controls in my house, and trust me, I've done that before, I want Daytona USA 2, I want Scud Race, I want the original Daytona. There's so many other games that I would want in my collection before something like NASCAR Arcade. But if you want to experience the game and play it, you can just load up Demul and have a ton of fun. And I would say, even though I'm not really a Star Wars fan, this one right here, I just feel like it's kind of a weak release from Sega. The tracks aren't all that interesting, the races aren't all that fun. It is an okay game, but considering the heights of what Sega developed, as far as arcade racing games are concerned, I would say this one doesn't hit the mark in any way, shape, or form, and definitely has always left me a little bit feeling like it's a bummer. But if you move over to something like Planet Harriers, I will safely say, at least in my opinion, this is one of the biggest Sega hidden gems that basically nobody knows exists and has never played before. I'm always telling people to play it. It is straight up one of my favorite Sega games of all time, and it's going to be our second soundtrack sample. So go ahead and listen for 45 seconds, and I'll come back, talk a little bit more about the games, and why I love the hardware and think no one should actually try to collect for it. It's an absolutely amazing soundtrack and my favorite game by far on the Sega Hikaru, and I know I say this hardware sucks and no one should try to collect for it, myself included, but here's the thing about video game esoteric's personality. I do not heed my own advice and I'm still looking for one of these, because I absolutely love collecting absolute dumpster fire disasters. This is a Konami Cobra Arcade PCB right here. It is the only board in my collection that I have not yet managed to figure out how to repair, and that's what I'm going to do with Hikaru as well, because sometimes actually fixing the hardware, playing around with it, even if it is broken, is where I get a lot of the fun. But you have to commend Sega. They decided to make an entirely new arcade platform that was from the ground up bespoke, minus the SH4s from the Dreamcast with a higher clock speed, just so they could release one game about firefighting. That is how crazy Sega was back in the day, and that's why I absolutely love them. They just decided they would spend millions of dollars to make some hardware on a game, and then that game probably wouldn't even recoup whatsoever, and then Sega would wonder to themselves, why are we in financial trouble? But I'm glad they did, because it gave us a ton of fun. If you've ever played any of these games, leave me a comment down below and tell me what you think. But we're done. Go grab Demul, go play some Hikaru. Trust me, it's absolutely worth it, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.